Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we're diving back into the works of Mr. Aleister Crowley. This is Liber 4. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. That part is important. And now, with that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Liber 4 with Chapter 7, Samadhi. This is the end of Part 1. We should be able to get through this one today. I am not good with estimating time, as we have seen from the last few videos, but I do believe that we will get through this today. This is the last chapter of Part 1. So, more rubbish has been written about Samadhi than enough. We must endeavor to avoid adding to the heap. Now, I took the pleasure of looking this up because we did not get an explanation yesterday for the dhyana at all, really. And Samadhi is in Indian religions is a state of meditative consciousness. So it is being in the oneness. I do give a description of that and how to attain it in the book. And so it is being in the state of oneness where you can actually do things while still in the state of oneness. We will see what he describes it as. It will probably not be that. Even Patanjali, who is extraordinarily clear and practical in most things, begins to rave when he talks of it. Now, I wish that he would give us that. I don't know if he will. Probably not, right? I would like to know what this rave would be. Even if what he said were true, he should not have mentioned it because it does not sound true. There are many things which are true, which will not sound true, and which, in fact, the control systems will convince you are not true or are intrinsically evil, and none of that is true. Right? So just because it does not sound true does not mean that it is not true. I have healed myself through the electromagnetic manipulations of the forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. And so many things which other people will consider to be impossible, I am going to at least give consideration to because I have done some impossible things. Because it does not sound true, and we should make no statement that is a priori improbable without being prepared to back it up with the fullest proofs. And once again, I have written that in a book, right? It does not get much more concrete than putting it down in an enchantment. But it is more than likely that his commentators have misunderstood him. The most reasonable statement of any acknowledged authority is that of Vajnavalkya, who says, by pranayama, impurities of the body are thrown out. By dharana, the impurities of the mind. By pratyahara, the impurities of attachment. And by samadhi is taken off everything that hides the lordship of the soul. There is a modest statement in good literary form. If we can only do as well as that, probably not. In the first place, what is the meaning of the term? Etymologically, Sam is the Greek, in the Greek alphabet, sigma upsilon nu. The English prefix, sin, meaning together with, adhi, means Lord, and a reasonable translation of the whole word would be union with God, the exact term used by Christian mystics to describe their attainment. It is quite vitally important to remember that this word is not Greek. It has no relation to the Greek or to the English, and to try to get to the etymology of a Hindu word by looking to a similar sounding Greek word is remarkably fucking stupid. Right? Now, it may be a possibility that the Greek word was derived from the Hindu word because the Hindu word is almost certainly millennia older than the Greek, and in that case, okay, fine. The root for Sam in Greek is the Hindu, whatever. This statement right here is not going to be valid in any other circumstance whatsoever. That is like saying that you can explain a Chinese word by a similarity in English. It is not a possibility. It is beyond credulity. It is stretching the realm of possibility to even consider such. And I again, do not say things like that very lightly. This is stupid, right? There is no reason to believe this. And again, I'm not an etymologist. I have not done a deep dive on these two. But I do know that this word, Samadhi, predates Greece as a country, right? So there was no Greek language from which to derive a Hindu word from. We have gone through Blavatsky, and if there was one thing of value in that entire exploration that we did, it was that most of the Greek beliefs probably did originate in the Far Eastern Hindu lands. Maybe even as far east as China, that is not determined. But it is Far Eastern, right? It is not that the Greeks went east and gave them this word. If anything, the Greeks took their word from the Hindu. And so this entire paragraph on its face can be thrown away. It has no value whatsoever except to prove that, once again, Mr. Crowley will just throw together whatever he can to make it sound like he knows what the fuck he's talking about. This is not the first time that he has done so. What appears to be happening in this book, and again, this is not unusual, we saw the same thing with Levi, is that he saw a market opportunity, right? And he was a little bit above average in thought. That it was not far above average in thought is very obvious from his life. But he was just enough above average in thought that he was able to be charismatic and to spin things in the right way. The only reason that anyone takes him for an authority at all is because up until very recently, like the last 15 years of existence, the information on these people was not readily available, right? The internet has allowed us to learn things that would not have been available back in the day. And so if the only thing that you had learned about Mr. Crowley was that he had caused a stink for giving this particularly horrible ritual that he did a couple of times across the pond, then you could consider him to be an authority because he drew a crowd and he was able to perform a ritual. It doesn't matter that the ritual was completely ineffective both times that he did it, right? That doesn't have any bearing. He did this in a public place. He was an authority. That is the only reason that he gets any attention, is because his life was not available to the people who would have been investigating him. Because if you investigate his life, then you can tell that he does not have the fruit that would have shown that he actually knew what he was talking about. But instead, he had that little bit of charisma, and he was able to take all of these systems and pull just enough so that he could sound like he knew what he was talking about, and relay that in a way that it would sound like he knew what he was talking about, but he did not, right? And because of his efforts and the efforts of people like Mr. Levi, and I do believe that Levi was completely duplicitous in his entire efforts, right? I believe he was working antithetical to the furtherance of knowledge of magical practices. I don't believe Mr. Crowley was doing that. I just believe that he did not have an understanding whatsoever in what was actually necessary. But because of that, we get instances where people are doing this stupid shit, right? There are people out there performing blood sacrifices. And yes, I see you. I know that you're watching my videos. I saw you did that video on Carl Jung, which you have never done before in the last 15 years that you've been on the platform. And so I see you. You know that I was calling you out for doing that blood magic, and yes, it was stupid, right? You listened to these people. You thought that they were an authority, and you got the results that are perfectly understandable from putting these things into action. If you do the things that are described in this book, you will get a result, but it will not be a positive one, right? This guy does not know what he is talking about. He has been ineffective in his application of this in every single instance in his life. He had one very brief period where he was successful. And the entire rest of his life, he lived off of he was destitute, living off of the charity of others. For his whole life, he blew through a fortune, right? Because he's stupid. And so this is just him selling you a book. It sounds great, but it's not effective, right? And this is just one of the ways you can confirm that, right? These slightest, like, I haven't done the research, but I guarantee that this is not taken from the Greek, right? Samadhi was not taken from the Greek. And I know, I just went off on a rant, but good God. Now, there is great confusion because the Buddhists use the word samadhi to mean something entirely different, the mere faculty of attention. Well, I wonder who has the better interpretation of it, the people who came up with it, or some guy who is trying to derive from the Greek a word that is much older. I wonder which one is going to be the more effective. I wonder which one is probably correct. This belief system that has been using this word for 3,000 years, or you, who was not using it effectively at all, ever in your entire life. I wonder which one. Thus, with them, to think of a cat is to make samadhi on that cat. They use the word jhana to describe mystic states. This is excessively misleading, for as we saw in the last section, dhyana is a preliminary of samadhi, and of course, jhana is merely the wretched plebeian Pali corruption of it. Footnote: the vulgarism and provincialism of Buddhist canon is infinitely repulsive to all nice minds. Holy fuck. Okay. Once again, we have done an extensive study, right? Now, I do not hold Ms. Blavatsky as the highest epitome of knowledge on things Hindu, but she did, in fact, do a very thorough investigation on things Buddhist and Hindu, right? And so, you could say many things about the Buddhist, right? Many things. Vulgarism and provincialism. Now, provincialism, okay, fine, that is backwoodsness, right? And most of the Buddhists are not going to be concerned with technological advancement. Provincialism. But vulgarism? Really? And now, they don't have the same moral code as, say, Christianity would have had. And so there is some differences between what is acceptable culturally there and what is acceptable culturally here, but that is an ethics situation, right? If you grow up and polygamy is the style, then you will grow up in polygamy. If you grow up and there's human sacrifice, you're going to grow up doing human sacrifice, right? It is what you were brought up in. The things that are acceptable change greatly over vast distances, right? The things that are acceptable in the United States are definitely not if you go to Afghanistan. For instance, right? They throw people off of buildings for things that are perfectly fine here. But to intimate that the Buddhist religion is vulgar, by what means? By what standard? They do not set out to offend anyone, ever, at any point, intentionally. Right? That is like one of the core tenets. Right? To be adjustable around the other people is definitely one of the core tenets of Buddhism. Right? They don't use profanity, right? They may not bathe as regularly as we do, but 100 years ago, nobody did, right? We didn't have the great understanding of sanitation back then, and granted, over there, they still kind of don't, right? If you've been to India, it's kind of a dirty place. But the vulgarism is the part, like, that's not intrinsic to Buddhism. That's not to say that there are not vulgar people who are Buddhist. But it is not intrinsic to the Buddhist canon to be vulgar, right? There are things morally that are gray to us, that are white to them, and it's not a problem. But that is a cultural thing. It is not vulgarism, right? This right here is revealing something, but it is something about you, and it is not something about them. And the attempt to use the terms of an egocentric philosophy to explain the details of a psychology whose principal doctrine is the denial of the ego was the work of a mischievous idiot. Well, they do say it takes one to know one. Right, the attempt to use the terms of an egocentric philosophy, because that's what Buddhism is. Buddhism is exactly me, right? It is all centered around me. It is all me. It is egocentric. Absolutely. The entirety of Buddhism is all about me. I mean, are you kidding me? The details of a psychology, which you're using the word wrong, you do not know what this means, whose principal doctrine is the denial of the ego, right? Yes, the principal doctrine is the denial of the ego. No. Let us unhesitatingly reject these abominations, the nastiness of the beggars dressed in rags that they have snatched from corpses, and follow the etymological signification of the word as given above. Or we can have some fucking common sense and not do that, right? The nastiness of the beggars dressed in rags they have snatched from the corpses. Now, I do not know the intimacies of the religion, right? I only know the topical conversations that we have covered here. I have not done a deep dive directly into Buddhism. And it may very well be that their beggars snatch clothes from corpses, but probably not. Generally speaking, grave digging is frowned upon anywheres. And if they bury someone and you go and take them up, you're probably going to wind up in a bad spot. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to have the best clothing, right? You're a beggar. You're getting what people give you. And so people will give you clothes, and you're not going to have the best sanitation, granted. So maybe a little bit of nastiness. But again, there is nothing intrinsically nasty about Buddhism. Like, even the practice of it, I'm pretty sure they have ritual bathing too. And so, no. And then, follow what I told you about the Greek being the actual place that this word came from is, again, just fucking retarded. And I don't use that, right? When I use the word retarded, I am not talking about a person with a diagnosed learning deficiency, right? Down syndrome or Asperger's or anything of that nature. I am never talking about people with special needs. I am talking about people who do not have special needs, who act like they do. There are many kinds of Samadhi. Footnote, apparently, because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. That is, the obvious results are different. Possibly the cause is only one, refracted through diverse media. Some authors consider Atman Darshana, the universe, as a single phenomenon without conditions, to be the first real Samadhi. If we accept this, we must relegate many less exalted states to the class of dhyana. Patanjali enumerates a number of these states. To perform on these different things gives different magical powers, or so he says. These need not be debated here. Anyone who wants magic powers can get them in any dozens of different ways. Power grows faster than desire. The boy who wants money to buy lead soldiers sets to work to obtain it, and by the time he has got it, wants something else instead. In all probability, something just beyond his means. Such is the splendid history of all spiritual advance. One never stops to take the reward. That is not true. I have stopped to take the reward indeed. If you do not show appreciation for the things that you get, you will not get things. That is a guarantee, right? Living in a spirit of thankfulness is something that you should absolutely manifest in your life. You should cultivate that if you do not cultivate anything else other than the prayer, fasting, and meditation, right? A spirit of thankfulness will lead to more things to be thankful for. And so stop and take the reward. When something goes right in your life, take the time to acknowledge that. Stop and take the reward. But I do not doubt at all that he never once stopped to take the reward. We shall therefore not trouble at all about what any Samadhi may or may not bring as far as results in our lives are concerned. We began this book, it will be remembered, with considerations of death. Death has now lost all meaning. The idea of death depends on those of the ego and of time. These ideas have been destroyed, and so Death is swallowed up in victory. We shall now only be interested in what Samadhi is in itself and in the conditions which causes it. Let us try a final definition. Dhyana resembles Samadhi in many respects. There is a union of the ego and the non-ego, and the loss of the sense of time and space and causality. That is not what this is saying, right? This is you in a meditative state with the full cognition of time passing by. Duality in any form is abolished. The idea of time involves that of two consecutive things, that of space, two non-coincident things, that of causality, two connected things. These dhyanic conditions contradict those of normal thought, but in Samadhi they are very much more marked than dhyana. And while in the latter it seems like a simple union of two things, in the former it appears as if all things rush together and united. One might say that in dhyana there was still this quality, latent, that the one existing was opposed to the many non-existing. In Samadhi, the many and the one are united in a union of existence with non-existence. This definition is not made from reflection, but from memory. Further, it is easy to master the trick or knack of dhyana. After a while, one can get into that state without preliminary practice, and looking at it from this point, one seems able to reconcile the two meanings of the word which we debated in the last section. From below, dhyana seems like a trance, an experience so tremendous that one cannot think of anything bigger, while from above, it seems merely a state of mind as natural as any other. Frater P, before he had Samadhi, wrote of dhyana. Perhaps, as a result of the intense control, a nervous storm breaks. This we call dhyana. Samadhi is but an expansion of this, so far as I can see. 5 years later, he would not take this view. He would say perhaps that dhyana was a flowing of the mind in one unbroken current from the ego to the non-ego without consciousness of either, accompanied by crescent wonder and bliss. Well, we know he's not able to do anything, right? This frater P, right? This is the alter ego, which is definitely a very good way of describing it. For Mr. Crowley himself, it is not some outside authority. It is the person dictating this book referring to himself. This is not his work. He dictated it to someone else to write down. He can understand how it is, how that is, the natural result of dhyana, but he cannot call dhyana in the same way the precursor of Samadhi. Perhaps he does not really know the conditions which induce Samadhi. He can produce dhyana at will in the course of a few minutes' work, and it often happens with apparent spontaneity. With Samadhi, this, unfortunately, is not the case. He probably can get it at will, but cannot say exactly how or tell how long it might take him, and he could not be sure of getting it at all. Once again, this Samadhi, according to the definition that is given here in Wiki, is that you are in the state of the oneness, complete understanding of everything. Like, not the understanding of everything is wrong, but the awareness of the sensations are blending. You are blending into the everything, right? You start to lose the corporeality of yourself, even though you are still corporeal. That is absolutely attainable. That is, like, I tell you, right? It's one of the things I wrote in the book. I can do this walking, right? When I begin my walk, I do a prayer, I enter into a state of meditation, and I achieve this while I am doing it, while I am actively engaged in walking, right? It is not something that is requiring the meditative state. Now, that is with the caveat that I have been doing this a while, and I have the practice of getting there. I don't suggest that you start trying to learn it while you're walking, but it is a thing that you can achieve while you are doing so. And so, while he may not have achieved it, that is probably because he was an idiot. One feels sure that one can walk a mile along a level road. One knows the conditions, and it would have to be a very extraordinary set of circumstances that would stop one. But though it would be equally fair to say, I have climbed the Matterhorn and I know I can climb it again, yet there are all sorts of more or less probable circumstances, any one of which would prevent success. Now, we do know this, that if thought is kept single and steady, dhyana results. We do not know whether an intensification of this is sufficient to cause samadhi, or whether some other circumstances are required. One is science, the other is empiricism. One author says, unless memory deceives, that 12-second steadiness is dharana, 144 dhyana, and 1728 samadhi. As we discussed yesterday, or in the last video, it wasn't actually yesterday, with the beads, right? He was telling you that when you made a mistake to count the bead, that is exactly opposite of what you would want to do if you want to achieve the state. There is nothing about losing your ability to focus that is going to be you focusing upon a bead at all. It is the exact same thing right here, right? 12-second steadiness is dharana. Who's counting? Are you counting? In that case, you are not there. Right? If someone else is counting, how do they know? Because your eyelids don't blink? That's stupid. 44 is dhyana. Now, you're just going to pull some random number out of your ass, right? You could make the argument that 12 has a basis, being one of the foundational units of time that we use, but not even really, right? 44, just some random ass number. Why is it not 43? Why is it not 45? 45 would at least be a part in whole of the minute, right? At least that's 3/4 of a minute. Like, what's the fucking point of 44 seconds? Oh, I bet it coincides with one of those random ass gematria numbers, right? It just some random number that I say that this number is holy because I can do math, right? I bet that's what it's tied to. And then 1728. Just completely fucking random number pulled out of absolutely nowheres for no reason whatsoever, just because it sounds authoritative. Like that, what? 1728. Okay, whatever. Stupid. Okay, stupid. And Vivekananda, commenting on Pantajali, makes dhyana a mere prolongation of dharana, but says further, suppose I were meditating on a book, and I gradually succeeded in concentrating the mind on it and perceiving only the internal sensation, the meaning, unexpressed in any form, the state of dhyana called samadhi. Other authors are inclined to suggest that samadhi results from meditating on subjects that are in themselves worthy. For example, Vivekananda says, think of any holy subject, and explains this as follows. This does not mean any wicked subject. Well, that would be intrinsic. Perceiving all of the internal sensation, the meaning unexpressed in any form. All right, that is just the observation without the explanation. So yes, walking in the oneness. And yes, I mean, holy subject and wicked subject are going to be intrinsically opposed to each other, diametrically opposed even. Frater P would not like to say definitely whether he ever got dhyana from common objects. He gave up the practice after a few months and meditated on the kakaras. I'm assuming that maybe that is chakras, right? Let's see if that word has something. Kakara. Yeah, see, chakra. Just a misunderstanding. Okay. Also, his dhyana became so common that he gave up recording it. He can't say whether he got it, but he became so common that he gave up recording it. Those two things absolutely go together, you're right. But if he wished to do it this minute, he would choose something to excite his godly fear, or holy awe, or wonderment. Footnote. It is rather a breach of the skepticism, which is the basis of our system, to admit that anything can be in any way better than another. There's a reason you did not get results. And you just keep reiterating it. Do it thus. A is a thing that B thinks holy, and it is natural, therefore, for B to meditate on it. Get rid of the ego. Observe all your actions as if they were another's, and you will avoid 99% of the troubles that await you. Do not follow any advice that Aleister Crowley gives you, and you will avoid 99% of the problems that await you. There is no apparent reason why dhyana should not occur when thinking of any common object of the seashore, such as a blue pig. But Frater P's constant reference to this as the usual object of his meditation need not be taken au pied de la lettre. His records of meditation contain no reference to this remarkable animal. It will be a good thing when organized research has determined the conditions of Samadhi, but in the meantime there seems no particular objection to our following tradition and using the same objects of meditation as our predecessors, with the single exception which we shall note in due course. The first class of objects for serious meditation, as opposed to preliminary practice, in which one should keep to simple recognizable objects whose definiteness is easy to maintain, is various parts of the body. The Hindus have an elaborate system of anatomy and physiology, which has apparently no reference to the facts of the dissecting room. Prominent in this class are the 7 chakras, which will be described in part 2. There are 8. There are actually many more than that, right? There are greater and lesser chakras. The 7 great chakras, 7 great internal chakras, start at the base, at the bottom of the spine, and move up in sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, crown. And there is also the divine, which encapsulates you. Those are the 7 majors. But there is also 1 in each of your palms. There is 1 in each of the base of your feet. There is 1 in each of your knees and your elbows. They control the flow from, like, your heart controls your hands, your base controls your feet. Like, you even have some in your ears and your eyes, right? But those are minor ones that are ruled by the other ones. The ones in your hand and your elbows are ruled by the heart. The ones in your feet and your knees are ruled by the base. And so there are areas of responsibility for the greater chakras. So there are actually more than the 8 chakras that are the intrinsic ones that you can use for manifestation. But the major chakras, the 7 internal and the 1 external, are how you enable, right? That is literally how I give you the instructions on manifestation. The as below is the sacral, or the base, the sacral, and the solar plexus. The as above is the crown, the third eye, and the throat. You meld those in accordance with each other through the heart out into the divine, and that is what creates manifestation. I have a whole video on that. It is part of the Esoterica playlist. It is part of the Infinite Integrations playlist. Either one of them will get you there. And so there are indeed many chakras, but the 8 that I focus on are the ones that have been effective for me. Some people see it as 1. That's going to be a lot less effective in my opinion. Some people see it as 3, and they have had some results. I cannot comment on their results, but for me it is intrinsic to have the 7 internal and the 1 external. That is how it was revealed to me. And so prominent in this class are the 7 internal chakras. Yes, there is one more that is not explained anywheres, right? So back to the text. There are also various nerves, equally mythical. Here's another thing that is intrinsic to this. There is God, who was infinite and decided to create. And at that moment when he decided to create, he went from the infinite and limited himself into the finite. That point where he limited himself is called the beginning. Before the beginning, there was God, and he was infinite and without bounds. Afterwards, there are bounds that he has placed upon himself, and so he is finite. That moment of transition is the beginning, but it is a snapshot, and everything is held in stasis. God spoke and said, I am the light, and became the light, and the light was good. And so that was setting creation into motion. It existed at the moment of the beginning, and then it became and was set into motion. That setting into motion is the spirit logos in action. The way that that manifests in you is when you decide to wiggle your fingers, your ego, the soul, makes the decision. I want to wiggle the fingers in my 5D navigation device, which is the temple of God, right? You are the individualized piece of divinity that resides inside of the temple temporarily in order to accomplish things here in the 5D universe. But when you make that decision to wiggle your fingers, your ego doesn't make that happen. The spirit does. It sends an electrical discharge from your brain through these nerves, which are mythical, and that electrical signal moves your fingers for you. That electrical signal is the spirit. You command the spirit by telling it to wiggle your fingers. You can command the spirit in other ways as well. There are rules which govern it, the 8 laws of creation, but you can do that. It is intrinsic to manifestation that you understand these electrical impulses traveling through the nerves. It is not mythical. It is a proven fact, right? Now, we have the lens of history. We have scientific knowledge from the dissecting room, which actually brings this into accordance in great ways. These 7 energetic centers, which are called the chakras, each have an area of responsibility to hold you together, right? The base holds you in base existence. The sacral is your desire to create things. The solar plexus is how you get the fuel. Your heart is what ties together the as above and the so below. The throat is where you manifest your dreams by speaking them aloud. You envision them with your third eye. You receive messages through your crown. All of these are responsibility areas, and each one of them has their own designations. I talk about that quite often in the Infinite Integrations playlist and in the Tarot playlist pretty much every day. And so if you're interested in any more knowledge on that, I have resources that are going to be considerably better than you will find here. Footnote. This is not quite correct. Western anatomical knowledge has advanced since Crowley wrote this. See that lens of history? The second class is objects of devotion, such as the idea or form of the deity, or the heart or body of your teacher, or of some man whom you respect profoundly. This practice is not to be commended because it implies a bias of the mind. There is absolutely nothing wrong with projecting your object of devotion as the deity. Now, with that is with the full understanding that you will not have the full understanding of the deity. No matter what your conception of it is wrong, right? The deity is more than any human can conceive of. Myself most definitely included in that. I have a small understanding that I have been given through revelation, which I relay to you, hopefully fairly clearly. And so I do have a little bit of authority there. But I do not claim to know the entirety of the deity. I do not claim to know the only path to the deity. I am not a prophet. I am merely an adept on the road to enlightenment. I have achieved a small amount. I have affected physical change through the things that I do. But I am not in any way to be considered a holy man or even necessarily the example. Right now, I do set myself up as an example. Intentionally, that is a self-discipline thing that I have. I hold myself to an extraordinarily high standard. That does not mean that I am perfect. That does not mean that I achieve that high standard all of the time, but it is my goal to do so. I am intentionally setting myself as a target. Do not meditate upon my heart, right? That was the point of this. You can set the deity, right? That is perfectly acceptable. That is, in fact, probably the best way to go about it. But not your teacher or some man whom you respect profoundly. Do not tie it to the corporeal plane at all. That is fairly simple. Do not revere a person, no matter how holy they may appear. Right? We are all created exactly equal. Some of us make better choices, but that is our path. It does not make us better. And so, do not place anyone upon the pedestal. It is perfectly fine to set God upon the pedestal with the understanding that your understanding of God will not be a complete understanding. And so this practice is not to be commended except in the part of the deity, not because it implies a bias of the mind, but because it is placing the emphasis in the entirely wrong place. Back to the text. You can also meditate on your dreams. This sounds superstitious, but the idea is that you have already a tendency, independent of your conscious will, to think of those things which will consequently be easier to think of than others. This is the explanation is evident from the nature of the preceding and subsequent classes. Right? Now, that is again absolutely a thing. Your dreams, if you have them, is generally telling you something. It is how you deal with your everyday life. That is what dreams quite literally do. Right? If you're facing problems, you work through them in your dreams. Now, I do not have this. Right? I have had dreams. Not often. I very rarely ever. Right? Now, that may be that I don't remember them. I am perfectly willing to accept that. But it has been such an extended period of time throughout history that I have to say that I do not dream on a normal. Right? There are times that I do. But if I do, I tend to remember them. And it does indeed have bearing quite eminently in my life. Right? If I dream about something, it is something that is very likely to take place within a week, almost every single time. There are a few exceptions. Some of them are recorded on the channel. Some of them have not as of yet proven true. Some of them might, and that's a little bit scary. But other than that, I don't have dreams all that often, so I cannot speak with any great authority upon this, with the exception of that when I have a dream, it is bearing upon my life in very real ways, and I do reflect upon them, not necessarily meditate, but that comes back down to the definition between prayer and meditation, which Crowley had no understanding of whatsoever. You can also meditate on anything that especially appeals to you. That is it's some advice, I guess. And once again, if you are actively choosing the object, it is not meditation, it is prayer. But in all this, one feels inclined to suggest that it will be better and more convincing if the meditation is directed to an object which in itself is apparently unimportant. One does not want the mind to be excited in any way, even by adoration. See the 3 meditative methods in Liber HHH. The way that he named these are stupid. Footnote. There are the complements of the 3 methods of enthusiasm, A delta instruction not yet issued, up to March 1912. How are you going to make a note for something that is not recorded and not record the thing that you are making a note of? Right? You are telling us that this instruction is not yet issued up until the point of publication, right? And this indeed is right before World War I. I wasn't sure yesterday, right? Up until March of 1912, which was like right before World War I, right? This was not recorded, and so you decided to make a footnote that it's not recorded instead of making a footnote of the actual compliment, right? Why? What is the point of that? This is like this is just saying something for no damn reason whatsoever. At the same time, one would not like to deny positively that it is very much easier to take some idea towards which the mind would naturally flow. The Hindus assert that the nature of the object determines the Samadhi, that is, the nature of those lower Samadhis which confer so-called magic powers. For example, there are the Yoga Pravariti. Meditating on the tip of the nose, one obtains what may be called the ideal smell. That is, a smell which is not any particular smell, but is the archetypal smell, of which all actual smells are modifications. The archetypal smell, you say. The archetypal smell. What is that going to, like, all smells are modifications of the archetypal smell, which I smelt in my state, but you probably won't because it doesn't exist. It is the smell which is not a smell. This is the only reasonable description. That is not a reasonable description at all. It is not a description at all. It is very, very, not even barely a clarification of a thought. For the experience being contrary to reason, it is only reasonable that the words describing it should be contrary to reason too. It is reasonable that it be contrary to reason, you say. That absolutely makes sense. Footnote. Hence, the Athanasian Creed. Compare the precise parallel in the Zohar. The head which is above all heads, the head which is not a head. Similarly, concentration on the tip of the tongue gives the ideal taste. On the dorsum of the tongue, ideal contact. Every atom of the body comes into contact with every atom in the universe all at once, is the description Bhikkhu Anandamatthaya gives of it. The root of the tongue gives the ideal sound, and the pharynx the ideal sight. None of that is going to be intrinsically true. I do not doubt that you will get an experience if you do these things, right? There are people that concentrate on this little divot underneath the nose and meditate on that all day long, and those people are doing life wrong. They are not going to achieve what they want to achieve. They might achieve something, but it will be rather useless. I do not know that there is an archetypal sight, sound, thought, taste, right? Archetypal is a big word, right? We haven't dived into that. We will be diving into that with Carl Jung, but the archetype is the overarching thing that is, right? The warrior is an archetype. The mother is an archetype. But even those archetypes contain sub-archetypes, right? There is the nurtured mother, there is the destructive mother. They are contained under the header of the archetypical mother. It contains both. And so there are archetypes that we can refer to, but you will never find them in perfection ever in the mortal plane, because they are of dual nature, and therefore there is a balance to be stricken, and the striking of the balance is kind of what life is about. I do not know that there is an ideal taste, an ideal smell, an ideal sound. It is something that I will not attempt to try to find, right? There are many things that I find useful in meditative practices. This is not going to be one of them, right? I've already talked about how I find sitting in a meditative pose for over an hour to be counterproductive to actual enlightenment altogether. Focusing upon this one little piece of whatever it is, whether it's the tip of your tongue or the area under your nose or the tip of your nose or whatever it happens to be, while it can be a focus, and that focus can be useful for the clearing of the mind in the exact same way that the breath exercises are, it is not intrinsically going to be a necessity. I have not done that, right? I do focus on my third eye, kind of, right? I withdraw into myself and move the energies, but it is not something that I'm visualizing, so there's that. And like, I don't try to stay in one particular area. When I move the energy, I'm kind of moving myself into the everything. And so for me, no single part of this is necessary at all. It might be a possibility that you can do these things. People do practice them for a reason. But for me, it is going to be counterproductive to the positive things, right? It is probably going to be you being prideful, right? If you are going into it that you think you are going to be better than other people because you meditate for 12 hours a day, that is a prideful situation, and it is going to be completely detrimental to what you are trying to do in your meditation. That is just as simple as it can be, right? If you are going into it thinking that any part of the practice of anything that I tell you at any point in time is going to make you better than someone else, you are doing it wrong. Right? Everybody is equal. We may make better choices, but that does not make us better people. Footnote. Similarly, Patanjali tells us that by making samyama on the strength of an elephant or a tiger, the student acquires that strength. Conquer the nirvudana and you can walk on the water, samana, and you begin to flash with light. The elements, fire, air, earth, and water, and you can do whatever in natural life they prevent you from doing. For instance, by conquering earth, one could take a shortcut to Australia. Or by conquering water, one can live at the bottom of the Ganges. They say that there is a holy man at Benares who does this, coming up only once a year to comfort and instruct his disciples. But nobody need believe this unless he wants to, and you are even advised to conquer that desire should it arise. It will be interesting when science really determines the variables and constants of these equations. I am going to go out on a limb here and say that this is not true, right? Just in the same way that they have these yogis that have subsisted on nothing but air for decades, I do not believe that ever at all, even for a moment, right? There is no part of the mortal existence that you are going to be exempt from, and while you may, in the short term, be able to achieve results which will make you think that you are doing so, you are not, right? There is fasting is a thing, extended fasting is a thing, and part of that is that you do kind of get over the hunger part of it, right? After about a day, for me, the second day, I don't even really think about it, right? And so if I am in a state of extended fasting, then that is not something that is constantly on my mind. And so you can consider that in a way to be that, but your body is still digesting, right? It is, even if there is nothing to digest, it is still producing the acids which would do so. Anything that you do take in, such as water, is going to contain trace elements. If you add honey, that's going to give you some carbohydrates. If you add lemon, that's going to give you some other things, right? You can make a tea and not partake of food, and that's a whole thing. So there are ways that you can sustain yourself that are not necessarily intrinsically eating a meal every day. I do not believe at all that these extended periods have happened. I believe that the people who say that are selling a load. They are trying to convince someone of something that may not have happened. And again, that is with the caveat that doing without food is a thing that people do, right? Even to the point where it is not necessarily detrimental, right? Some extended fasts, you don't even realize that you were, like, it may be, depending upon your level of current activities and things like that, that you don't even lose weight from a 40-day fast. That is highly unlikely, however, but it is a possibility. And so I don't believe this at all. Right? I don't believe that these people existed upon air for years. I don't believe that. I don't believe that anybody is able to cut through the earth and find a shortcut to the Australia at all. Now, you can do so astrally. That's not a problem. That is not your corporeal being passing through corporeal, right? I don't believe that you can live at the bottom of the Ganges. I believe that people might be able to deceive you into believing that they do, but they do not do so. And so you can take this how you want to. I will dismiss it because of the source and the subject matter. So, next. The Samadhi, par excellence, however, is Atma Darshana, which for some, and those not the least instructed, is the first real Samadhi. For even the visions of God and of the self are tainted by form. In Atma Darshana, the all is manifested as the one. It is the universe freed from its conditions. Not only are all forms and ideas destroyed, but also those conceptions which are implicit in our ideas of those ideas. Footnote. This is so complete that not only a black is white, but the whiteness of black is the essential of its blackness. Naught equals one equals infinity. But this is only true because of this threefold arrangement, or trinity, or triangle of contradictories. Each part of the universe has become the whole, and phenomena and noumena are no longer opposed. Alright, so let's look this word up real quick because I am not fully versed in it. That is thelema. We do not want the thelemic definition. Okay, so there is not a non-thelemic definition. Okay, so this is something that he has come up completely on his own. Okay, yeah, there is no reference to this outside of him. Each part of the universe has become, I don't know, what I was going to say about this is that I've had the vision of the oneness, right? The all is manifested as one. And what happened was I was pulled out of my body. I got to see the void, and then I got to see creation unfold, and then I got to see the web of life unfold after that, and the interconnectedness of all things. That was an experience that I was not able to create for myself. I do have aphantasia. I cannot intentionally create these things. It is something that I was awake for. I did recognize my body. And so this experience did happen for me as part of the enlightenment process. I assume that it happens for other people. I do not know that. But the visions of God himself, you're saying that was tainted? Why? Because I was there? Because my presence was there? Oh, because you have some preconceived notion about what it will be. I did not. When I went through this process, I did not have a preconceived notion of what should unfold. And so what unfolded was exactly what should have unfolded without my interference whatsoever. And you can say that it is tainted by my form. I will absolutely not. I will say that it is the all manifested as the one, and without your word that doesn't have any other reference outside of your own books, right? He created Thelema, the religious process, and we're not even going to get into the religion, right? We've already dealt with the concepts behind the religion. And so, yeah. But it is quite impossible to describe this state of mind. No, it's not. I tell you in the book. One can only specify some of the characteristics, and that in language which forms no image in the mind. Okay, so that's that. Like, I can relay to you my experience. I tell you this all of the time. I can relay my experience. I cannot give it to you. You do not have the full understanding of it unless you have the experience of it. That's why I tell you to replicate things. And so, yes, I guess it is impossible to accurately describe in its fullness. Okay, I will grant that. You can only specify some of the characteristics. I just did so. Right? There are more characteristics that I could describe, but I will never be able to describe them all in their entirety. And so, okay, I will grant you that this part is at least a little bit true. It is impossible for anyone who experiences it to bring back any adequate memory, nor can we conceive a state transcending this, is an absolute fucking lie. Right? I just relayed to you that I have, right? That was not something that I created for myself. It is not something that is going to bring me some benefit for relaying to you because it is false, right? I am relaying to you my accurate experience so that you can possibly recreate it for yourself. That's why I do it. I can absolutely bring back an adequate memory of the entire process. That is not a visualization. I don't see it when I want to, even though I've had it before. Right? I cannot visually cue anything, but I have the recollection of what happened in the exact same way that I can close my eyes and describe things that are in this room with no prompting. I can do the same thing with the experience. And so for you to say this, it's because you never got there. That's why you say this, because you never experienced it. Because if you did experience it, you would know that it is unforgettable. Right. And again, that is not something that I use lightly. Right. There are many things, like I remember my daughter being born. I remember being at the hospital, but I do not remember all of the details of that. It was one of the most important days of my life. My marriage, another one. I remember the process. I remember my son being born. Right. I was in the room. I helped. I don't remember the whole process. I remember the entirety of this vision from the beginning to the end in intricate detail. You didn't because you never had it. There is, however, a very much higher state. Is this another one of those words? Let's look it up. Shiva Darshana. Shaivism. Okay, so that's not just him. Experience of perceiving this supreme being facilitated by purification and knowledge of the self. Deuces, that's what's up. It signifies a state of insight where individuals recognize all existence as emanating from the Creator, who they list as Lord Shiva. Okay, so at least this one's not some word that he made up all by himself. There is, however, a very much higher state called Shiva Darshana, of which it is only necessary to say that it is the destruction of the previous state, its annihilation. And to understand this blotting out, one must not imagine nothingness, the only name for it, as negative but as positive. That is not an understanding of what we just read, right? Shiva Darshana is the understanding through a vision of this being the God, right? That is not annihilation. That is not blotting out. This is a misunderstanding of the word that you have. Right? We just looked it up. The normal mind is a candle in a darkened room. Throw open the shutters and the sunlight makes the flame invisible. This is a fair image of Dhyana. Footnote. Here the dictation was interrupted by a very prolonged thought due to the difficulty of making the image clear. Viracum. But the mind refused, but it's not his work, right? It's not his work, but we had to put this footnote that it was, yeah. But the mind refuses to find a simile for Atmandarshana. It seems merely ineffective to say that the rushing together of all the host of heaven would similarly blot out the sunlight. But if we do say so and wish to form a further image of Shiva Darshana, we must imagine ourselves as suddenly recognizing that this universal blaze is darkness. Not a light extremely dim compared with some other light, but darkness itself. It is not the change from the minute to the vast, or even from the finite to the infinite. It is the recognition that the positive is merely the negative. The ultimate truth is perceived not only as false, but as the logical contradictory to truth. It is quite useless to elaborate this theme, which has baffled all other minds hitherto. We have tried to say as little as possible rather than as much as possible. The ultimate truth cannot be logically contradictory of truth. That is an impossibility. It is not in the realm of possibility that the ultimate truth is the logical contradictory of truth. It can be the logical contradictory of your understanding of the knowledge that leads to truth. But the truth is the truth no matter what. The ultimate truth is that God is. That is an ultimate truth. Your understanding of that is not dependent upon, or that is not dependent upon your understanding of it. People have differing understandings of who God is, but the common is that God is. The fundamental truth is that God is. It is not that God is Jesus. It is not that God is Yahweh. It is not that God is Allah. It's not that God is Buddha. I know God wasn't Buddha, right? That is not it. It is that God exists. That is the fundamental truth. The other things are understandings of truth. You understand Jesus as God, even though there's no real reason for that, right? That is the understanding of the truth, and that's the part that can be contradictory to the ultimate truth. But the ultimate truth cannot be logically contradictory to the truth. Now, it does say perceived, right? I'm taking that out of the consideration because it was put in there just to throw some obfuscation, right? Again, this is coming from someone who had no understanding of what he was talking about. Footnote. Yet all of this come of our desire to be as modest as Yajnavalkya. Still further from our present purpose would it be to criticize the innumerable discussions which have taken place as to whether this is the ultimate attainment or what it confers. It is enough to say that it is enough if we say that even the first and most transitory dhyana repays 1,000-fold the pains we have taken to attain it. And there is this anchor for the beginner, that his work is cumulative. Every act directed towards attainment builds up a destiny, which must someday come to fruition. May all attain. And we are not going to read through these questions, right? What is genius and how is it produced? Is there any such thing? This is stupid. So that is going to bring us to the end of part 1, and hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I do have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. The clarification between what I know and what is being said here is the important part of this, right? There are many things. Well, I don't even want to say many. There are some things that you can take from this and use. but they are few. They are far between. Most of this is someone who does not have the understanding explaining it. That would be like asking a chef to explain to you physics. He has some understanding of the chemical processes of change. Baking is a chemical process of change. But he doesn't have the full understanding of causation and effect in the same way that a physicist would. Right? There's a fundamental not understanding of the subject matter. We have seen from the wiki, the introductory video, where we spent 2.5 hours talking about his life, that he did not have any of the fruits of the Spirit for the entirety of his life. He had one brief period of success after performing blood magic, which is stupid, and he got exactly what you would expect from performing blood magic. His marriage dissolved, all of his partnerships fell apart, he lived in destitution for the rest of his days. That is the natural outflow of blood magic every single time. It is important to me that I at least try to convey my understanding of the eternal, right? I wrote a whole book about that. This is my thoughts, what I have had revealed to me by my intuition through meditation and reflection, right? These are things that I feel are intrinsically true and can be replicated, and I have at least one person that can do these things. And so I do know that it is a possibility. Right? I am working from results. Now, by that I mean I put in the effort to get those results, and now I have them. I have been able to heal myself in a variety of ways. I have been able to affect other people. I don't talk about that because of how it worked out, right? But I have attempted these things. I bore the negative consequences for it. I am trying to save you from the negative consequences. If you follow the 8 laws of creation in the way that they are intended, you will not face those negative consequences. But if you don't, you will. Absolutely, intrinsically. And most of what we have seen from this is a violation of the 8 laws of creation. It is no wonder to me that his life fell completely apart. I could have just read without seeing the result, and I could have told you what the result would be. As a matter of fact, I might have done so in the wiki. And the natural outflow of doing things wrong is wrong results. That is the way it works. If you are using blood magic, you are doing it wrong. It doesn't matter if it's your blood. It doesn't matter if it's a goat's blood. It doesn't matter if it's a frog's blood. It doesn't matter if it's synthetic blood. It does not matter at all. If you are offering up blood, you are appeasing the wrong entities. That is a guarantee that I will give, and I do not give any guarantees. You may get some results, and they may even be positive for a short period of time, and then they will be absolutely negative if you are allowed to exist at all. That's where we're going to leave this. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that was stated. Put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book where I teach you how to do this responsibly. And it is short. There's 25,000 words, just under. You can read it in 2.5 hours. It is not difficult. I did not add all of this fluff intentionally. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pit's Take. Peace.